What is up, duelists, and welcome back to another Yu-Gi-Oh video. The World Championship is happening this weekend, and I know everyone is super excited for that. I am as well. I'm going to be live all 3 days for the World Championship, watch partying it with you guys together on Twitch. So if you're watching this over the course of the weekend, make sure to check out the link in the description to my Twitch channel so we can watch it together. But what people forget easily with all the excitement around the World Championship is that Magnificent Monsters is coming out next week, and that is a set that not only brings serialized cards to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game for the first time, but also has a lot of meta impactful cards in it that are going to really shape up the game in the upcoming months, I feel like, at least some of them. And that's what I want to talk about in today's video. We're going to be rating the new cards, not just the overframes, but also the other new cards in the set, and talk about what kind of implications they could have on the metagame. Before we start, I also want to let you guys know about a tournament that I'm going to be hosting or helping to host next month. On the 12th of September, we're hosting a hat format tournament IRL in Germany, in Karlsruhe. So if you are from Germany or from the closer area and you are into retro formats, then all the info to that is going to be in the description as well. And if you're not attending, feel free to watch it on my Twitch channel as well. I hope it's going to be a blast. We had a very good time with the Edison event that we hosted a couple years ago. This time we're doing hat format because I wanted to put some spotlight on other retro formats as well. So if that's something for you, like I said, all the info is in the description down below. But let's get started with Magnificent Monsters. All right, so what I have here is all the cards, and we are going to be ranking all of them in a tier list, but don't worry, we are going to go over the individual effects a little bit because I assume that not everyone is familiar with what all of these cards do, so I'm not just going to put them into a tier list, but we're also going to talk about what they actually do. So we're going to start with the 6 individual cards for each individual summoning mechanic. What they did was they just gave 1 card to each summoning mechanic, like a Ritual, Fusion, Synchro, XYZ, Pendulum, and Link. And we're going to start with a bang here. We have End of the World Ruler, or as it's going to be called in the TCG, Ruler of the End of the World, which is a level 10 ritual monster that is technically part of the Demise King of Armageddon archetype, or the End of the World archetype. But realistically, at the moment, this card is mostly being used in Mitsurugi, because what this card does is essentially it has a bunch of text that you can ignore for now. But the most important part is you can reveal this card in your hand, pay 2,000 life points, banish a ritual spell from your deck, and then apply that card's activation effect. So essentially, you're copying a ritual spell from your deck. This obviously is a consistency tool for Mitsurugi, because this just gives you more copies of Mitsurugi Ritual, but it also means, because it's copying the effect, that you circumvent the once per turn, or in Mitsurugi Ritual's case, twice per turn restriction of the card, meaning that you can activate up to 3 Mitsurugi Rituals in a turn. You can either summon twice from the deck, or you can tribute twice from the deck, whatever the situation calls for. Very, very strong card in especially pure Mitsurugi. But that's also, I think, the biggest downside of the card is that I feel like at the moment, Mitsurugi is shifting into a direction again, as it's been doing, at being mostly present in like hybrids. And I think hybrid variations like Mitsurugi Rolat, Azamina, Piles, I don't think are really going to make great use of End of the World Ruler. I think this card basically just makes pure Mitsurugi better and more of an option again, which I personally think is a good thing. I'm a fan of pure Mitsurugi, but I'm going to put this card in will see play instead of a game changer category because of that, because it doesn't go into the Mitsurugi like combo piles, which we have other cards actually that'll go into that pile later down the list. But End of the World Ruler is definitely a strong card, and it definitely will see play in pure Mitsurugi and maybe other decks in the future. Very, very strong card. Next up, we've got Nightmare Eyes Restrict, which is a new fusion monster from the Relinquished archetype that requires 2 monsters with different types from the Fiend Illusion Spellcaster types, and says gains attack equal to the combined attack of the monsters that are equipped to it. If it battles, neither can be destroyed. Typical illusion effect. And the opponent can only attack this one, which is actually quite the impactful protection effect when you combine it with the fact that it can't be destroyed by battle. Most importantly, though, if it's special summoned or at the end of the battle phase, if it battled, you can equip a monster the opponent controls to the card as an equip spell, and you can only use that effect of it once per turn. So it's decent removal. It's somewhat annoying to out in certain positions. I think the only interesting thing about this card really is the fact that the Relinquished Fusion spell is actually quite solid, because it's essentially a quick play spell Miracle Fusion for the archetype, so you can banish the material from the graveyard. And that's interesting because previously the Restrict Fusion monsters just needed very specific materials, like Millennium Eyes Restrict needed Relinquished and Thousand Eyes Restrict also needed Relinquished. This one doesn't, so this can technically be played with the fusion spell in any deck that has a bunch of like Fiend Illusions and or Spellcasters. You do need two different ones, so you need to mix at least two of these together in order to be able to play the card. As a result, I think this card, or the quick play spell fusion spell, the Relinquished Fusion with this card, can be a solid removal spell. At the same time, I think this is basically something that will only really see play in Genesis format, because all the effort you have to get through to make the card live and then the payoff you get, I think for advanced constructed format, I don't think this is something that will really be good enough or impactful enough to compete with how good the decks are in advanced constructed. But in Genesis format, this is already rumored to be a pretty solid engine. Overall, I'm going to put it in straight down the middle because, you know, I think it's not good enough for advanced constructed, but I think it's good enough for Genesis. So that's where it goes. I get asked very frequently where I get my TCG accessories from, like these Fallen and the Virtuous sleeves I've been using for my extra deck lately, or the Moltrami sleeves I've been using for my main deck for a while now, as well as something like this Ray and Rose playmat. Of course, you guys know the drill. Oh my god, yes. All of these are OCG exclusive products, meaning they are officially Konami licensed, but they are very hard to come by in the West because you can only buy them or win them at OCG Japan tournaments or stores, meaning that they are very hard to find over here in the West. And this is where the sponsor of today's video comes in, yugioh. Yugioh has been sponsoring the channel for a while now, and they sell all kinds of OCG products. They import them over from Japan and make them available to people over here in the West, which is awesome. You can check out their store. The link is in the description down below. You can use Josh10 for 10% off your order and to support the channel a little bit. They are based in Germany, but they do ship worldwide, and they have a variety of different TCG accessories, so you can just check what you want. The OCG has a bunch of really cool artworks on their playmats and sleeves and so on and so forth. So thank you to yugioh for being a longtime sponsor of the channel. I hope you guys find something that you like, and don't forget to use Josh10 for 10% off your order. Let's get back to the video. Then we have the Infernal Strike Fighter, which is the Synchro monster. It's a generic level 7 Dark Strike Fighter retrain that I actually quite like because it's one of those cards that goes into the category of not very useful going first, but very useful going second potentially. It has an effect that's only good during main phase 2. It's a quick effect, and it just says you can destroy as many face-up monsters on the field as possible, and if you do, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the total levels times 200, which is a throwback to the original Dark Strike Fighter. And if itself is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can target a level 5 or higher machine in the grave and special summon it in defense position. This, I think, is an interesting card for synchro decks if they can slot it in. If you can reach level 7, it can be a solid board breaker when you are going second. Of course, if we are talking level 7 board breaker synchro, it has to compete with Black Rose Dragon, which can blow up the board at any point, not just in main phase 2. However, this card does give you the ability to maybe close out a game that otherwise you wouldn't be able to close out because you just attack for like 6,000 damage and you make this and it's going to do the rest of the work for you, because level times 200 for all the monsters on the field, including your own, is a significant amount of burn damage in a synchro deck. Like if you blow up itself and like another level 10 synchro, that's a total level of 17. So that's 3,400 burn damage. So pretty strong closer for synchro decks. But because it is only useful going second, and you know, you need to be finding a deck that will be able to accommodate it in terms of extra X space, I'm going to throw it in a maybe category as well. But it is a pretty solid card, I would say. Galaxy Eyes Antimatter Dragon is either a generic rank 9, or you can summon it by using any XYZ monster that has 3 or more materials, and you will keep the materials around. So that already means it could be a way to cheat out a bigger Zeus, which already gives it some base utility. Any battle damage it inflicts while it has material is halved. You can detach a material from this card. It can make up to 2 attacks on monsters during each battle phase. And then if you detach the monster, you can send the monster with the same type as that monster from your deck to the grave. That is, on paper, a very powerful effect because it lets you Foolish Burial from the extra deck, essentially, which is very strong. There's a little ruling quirk with this card, however, that makes it a little bit worse, which is that you cannot use that effect when you go first, because the way this works is, because it gives itself 2 attacks during each battle phase this turn, if you're going first and you don't have a battle phase, you cannot legally activate that effect. Therefore, this card is also a lot better going second than it is going first, which ultimately makes me feel like it's a relatively similar in quality to the Infernal Strike Fighter, just in XYZ decks over synchro decks. But once again, the utility of making a big Zeus or sending a monster from the deck to the graveyard in any deck that can make it happen with a monster that has enough material, I think is neat. So a lot of these one-of support cards are actually quite solid, even though none of these are like game breaking, which I think is kind of a cool approach to this entire thing. And then we have the Pendulum. We got a new Kirin, Wind Unicorn, Parallel the Draco Slayer. If it's in the Pendulum zone, it essentially, to boil it down, it can either summon itself or the other monster in your Pendulum zone if it's a level 5 or lower. So it's like an extender, essentially, but you do need another Pendulum in your other Pendulum scale. While this Pendulum Summon card is in the Monster zone, the opponent cannot target it with card effects. Also, it can't be destroyed by card effects. Throwback to original Kirin. Quick effect, target a Pendulum monster card you control and a card your opponent controls, return them to the hand. You can only use this effect once per turn. This is kind of just like another Kirin, but this time it's a Draco Slayer, which does give it some advantages. You know, it does make it searchable. I haven't really tried to make a Pendulum pile work in a long time, so I can't really say how impactful this one in particular is. Personally, I find this one rather underwhelming, but the fact that it is a Draco Slayer might matter, so take this with a grain of salt. Also, later on, we're going to be talking about some more Pendulum support in the Grandmaster Rare / Overframe card pool that I think are actually quite solid, so maybe this card can see play in conjunction with those cards, but I think the star of the show are the other cards in the set. I think this card is only okay. And then we have Crystron Halqifibrax Prism, which is a Crystron Halqifibrax retrain. As a Link 3 this time around, 2+ monsters including a tuner. If it's Link summoned, you special a tuner from your extra deck in defense position with a level that's less than or equal to the total original levels of the monsters used as Link material. If you Link climb into this with a Link 2 and just one monster, then you are somewhat limited in terms of what levels you can summon. During your opponent's main or battle phase, quick effect, you can banish this card you control, special summon 3 Crystron tokens, but they cannot be tributed. This card is essentially a watered down Crystron Halqifibrax, but I think even a watered down Crystron Halqifibrax does have a lot of potential. I've seen some crazy combos with this card, however, it hasn't really taken off in the OCG, simply because we are living in a world right now where cards like Zena or cards like Charmer Quartet in Bloom are being printed, which as generic Link monsters just feel a little bit more potent in combo decks than this card at the moment. This is something that could change at any point in the future. This is a card that has a lot of potential, and I think that's why it goes into the middle tier right now, because I think it's not going to take off immediately, but this is one of those cards where I would recommend picking up one copy if it's not expensive in the beginning, because honestly, this is the case for most of these cards. Having one copy of these extra deck monsters I think is going to be pretty good, especially because I don't expect them to be expensive in the beginning. So, I mean, just having one until it becomes relevant, because they all have a decent chance to be relevant. Okay, next up, we have a set of new cards that are just randomly in here, but a bunch of different stuff in here. We start with Underworld Circle. This card is very underwhelming simply because of its activation condition. It's a very weird card, but it requires both players to have 5 or more monsters in the graveyard. And then it's like a dark hole. And then you banish all monsters from the deck face down. So it could theoretically be used to break a board and then completely ruin the opponent's follow-up by banishing the entire deck. And then there might be some decks that just can't work anymore. So in some ways, it offers you with a unique win condition. But the problem is, because you also have to have 5 monsters in your own graveyard, you can't start with it when you play into a board. It's also a continuous spell, so it can be countered by any removal. So yeah, I think this card is just unfortunately bad. It's an interesting concept, but not a very good execution. Orichalco's Sword of Sealing is essentially Axe of Fools. The equipped monster's effects are negated, so you know you can use it like that. And then also it lets you, if you have a card in the field zone, you can target any effect monster you control. It doesn't have to be the equipped monster. That monster gains the effect to quick effect, send the card from hand to grave, and then pop a face-up card. I think this card is very underwhelming. This is the type of card that I think is even too bad for Genesis format, personally. Even though in theory, yes, when you go second, you can equip an opponent's monster and negate its effect. And when you go first, you can give your own monster the quick effect, discard 1, pop 1. I just think the impact is not here. I think the impact is far too low for this card to be considered a good card in 2026. Maybe 10, 15 years ago, maybe more at this point, this card would be considered solid, but not even strong then. So I really don't think this is that crazy. Now we have another really big hitter, Rainbow Bridge Bifrost or Bifrost. Banish 3 level 10 or higher monsters from your extra deck, including a light synchro monster. Add a field spell from your deck to your hand. You can only activate one Rainbow Bridge Bifrost per turn. This is a card that essentially it's just terraforming if you don't need your extra deck to the full extent, right? Like there are some decks who won't be able to play this card just because there is a restriction, quote unquote, that you have to like use 3 slots in your extra deck for it. So some decks just can't do that, but in the majority of decks that really want a field spell, like Toons, which are coming up soon in the TCG, this card is just really good. I mean, we don't have to talk about the implications of being able to play more copies of Terraforming again. This is just going to make every deck that revolves around a field spell so much more consistent. It's a phenomenal card. I'm not putting it in Game Changer just because it is, quote unquote, just the enabler, just the searcher. But this is a very, very meta-relevant card. This is something that most people are going to want to pick 3 copies up just in case, because there is going to be decks that will want this card for sure. I can guarantee it. It's a really, really strong card and something to look forward to. You know, Blitzclick can play it as well in like Genesis format, or, you know, like I said, Toons. And so like, you can think of a million decks that have a field spell they want and don't need all 15 extra. And then there's 2 Malefic Traps, which I don't think are particularly strong. I mean, the cards themselves are fine. It's just that Malefic is not a very strong archetype is the issue with both Malefic Force and Malefic Paradigm Shift. One of them is even a quote-unquote hand trap because you can activate it from your hand by paying half your life points, I think. The Malefic Paradigm Shift lets you activate it from the hand by paying half your life points, and it gets you a field spell from like the Malefic world, and it gets you any Malefic monster. Unfortunately, those are not very good. Those are not very good. And Malefic Force similarly sounds kind of cool if it was for a different archetype maybe, but both of these are Malefic cards, so that is going to be rough for them. And I personally just don't really see a way for these cards to be good enough. Assault Blackwing Kusanagi the Gathering Storm is a generic level 9 synchro, even though it is a Blackwing. It honestly doesn't really need to be played in Blackwings because the only benefit you get if you use a Blackwing is that it is a tuner, which I think on a level 9 is kind of whatever. After this card is synchro summoned, it gains attack to the total original attack of synchro monsters used as material until the end of the turn, and it attacks all monsters once each, and it inflicts piercing battle damage. I think this is interesting for synchro decks because if you can manage to synchro climb into this, let's say you use a level 8 synchro and a level 1 tuner to make this, and this goes up to like 5k or more and attacks everything and inflicts piercing damage, that's a very good finisher. So this card is like deceivingly good, I think, as like a random like one of in synchro decks if you can afford it. So I'm gonna put this like slightly above the Infernal Strike Fighter. These two are kind of similar, just at different levels. You know, some decks will have easier access to level 7, some will have easier access to level 9. The caveat with this card is, of course, you kind of have to make it with a synchro. Otherwise, I mean, even 3k attack everything and inflict piercing is like not bad in some cases. So I think this card is solid. It's definitely not bad. And then we've got Master Spirit Tech Force Pendulum Ruler, which I'm going to save you some time. This is a fusion monster that requires 2 pendulums, and the payoff for it is not even that great. This card is not good. And then we've got WP Fancy Ball, which is the last card we're going into before we get into all of the really good stuff, all of the overframes. Of course, this card's already been out in Master Duel, and people were really looking forward to this card, and it didn't really deliver. This is kind of like an addition to the IP SP package. So it's 2+ effect monsters for Link 3. When the opponent activates a monster effect on field or grave, banish the card that was special summoned this turn until the end phase to negate that effect and banish it. During the opponent's main phase, you can immediately after this effect resolve, Link summon a Link monster. And if you use itself as a material, you can also use a Link 2 from your opponent. So the idea here is that instead of going straight up IP into SP, sometimes you can go IP into WP into SP, which makes IP Masquerena just a better interruption overall. And I think that is valid. I think WP Fancy Ball is a valid card. You can use it in multiple ways. You can IP into WP and then you can use itself in order to also use an opponent's monster, or you can use other monsters to make your SP, keep the WP Fancy Ball on the board, and then use the first effect. Because of course you can't make full use of both effects in the same turn, because if you use itself as material, you won't be able to banish it anymore until the end phase in order to get that effect. And if you banish it until the end phase, then you won't be able to do the other effect, of course. This card is solid. It hasn't really been crazy in Master Duel, but it's a card that will see play in some decks where IP is a part of the end board. I think you would just include the WP if you have the room in the extra deck, something like Mitsurugi, which commonly ends on IP Masquerena and doesn't really need the extra deck that much. I think is a natural inclusion into that deck, which also makes it the second card already that pure Mitsu can use alongside the End of the World Ruler. So some good stuff in here for that deck, but nothing. I think the best one out of these generic cards before we get into the overframes is definitely the Rainbow. Okay, overframe time or Grandmaster time, whatever you want to call it. We're going to go through them by the chronological order, essentially. So we're doing Dark Magician stuff first, because that's the one for dual monsters. Dark Magician, the Pharaoh's Servant. This card's name becomes Dark Magician while on the field or in the grave, and you can only use one of the following effects, and only once that turn. If it's in the hand, you can reveal a spell in your hand, special summon this card, and then set a spell trap that mentions Dark Magician. Or a quick effect, this card is spell, destroy all spell traps your opponent controls. Mainly, the good thing here is that this is just a phenomenal starter / extender for Dark Magician decks themselves, but doesn't even necessarily need to be played in Dark Magician. And this is something that really is going to be a theme with these Dark Magician cards from this set, is that, you know, Dark Magician of Destruction with stuff like Magician Souls or even Gaze of Timaeus to make Dragoon is already a very potent strategy in the TCG right now, and this just adds another really strong level 7 spellcaster to the mix. The only thing is, like, the spell cards you can set with this, a lot of them are quick plays, which means you can't activate them immediately. You can play stuff like Dark Magical Circle, but that card requires you to play like more Dark Magician cards. So this is a good card, but I wouldn't say it's the star of the show. The other two cards, I think, from the Dark Magician archetype are better, but this is a card that definitely goes into the will see play category. This is a strong card, both for the deck itself, like for Dark Magician players, but also for, you know, combo variations of other decks that are trying to use the Dark Magician of Destruction. And then we've got Karibo Multiply. When your opponent activates a monster effect or an opponent's monster declares an attack, special summon this card from your hand, and then once per turn when the opponent activates another monster effect on the field or during the damage calculation when an opponent's monster attacks, quick effect, add to your hand or special summon from your deck or grave a Dark Magician or a monster with 300 attack and 200 defense, and then change the opponent's attack to 0. This card is really good, actually, surprisingly. It doesn't read that crazy in the, like, at first glance, but 300 attack, 200 defense, even though it's meant to be like Karibo stats, has a lot of utility. You can summon Power Patrons with this, which is something that some people have been messing around with. But most importantly, well, I guess it's technically a Karibo as well. This can add Grifo, meaning that in any Rolat Chaos deck, whatever you call it, this is another turn 0 quote-unquote way to access Grifo. It's turn 0 hand trap, essentially, because your opponent activates their first effect, you summon it. On the next effect, you just add Grifo, which then gives you your Mind Shuffle on the first turn, of course, which lets you start into the game really well. The only downside of this card in strategies like that is that it doesn't really do this going first. So going first, this is a relatively mediocre card. As a result, I could see this card being a side deck card in Ritual of Light and Darkness decks, where you just side it in for going second as another way to like get into your engine consistently, and also on turn 0, which means you get to resolve your cards. Like, you get to start your turn. If you resolve that Mind Shuffle, you get to start your turn with like Gull Archfiend of Chaos, the Ritual spell in the graveyard, which of course is like an overwhelming amount of cards that you can have at the start of the game. So I think it's really good going second. It helps the deck out a lot. Is bad going first, so I don't know if people are going to main a bunch of it, but it's still a better card going first than something like a Mulcharmy, and people are already maining Mulcharmy, so maybe people will just play this card. It's pretty good. Definitely also will see play category. And then we have the big one, I think, for these cards. We have Dark Magical Curtain. Each player can special summon a Dark Spellcaster monster from the hand or deck, but neither player can activate their effects this turn. Then, if you special summon a monster whose original name is Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl, you can add a spell trap that mentions Dark Magician from your deck to your hand. You can only activate one per turn. So this card is really, really good. This is essentially emergency teleport for Dark Spellcasters, with the downside that you can't use the effect on the field in the turn that you summon it, but at the same time, it also lets your opponent summon one. So if you ever play like a mirror match, this could be kind of awkward. Then again, you are giving your opponent a monster that they can't activate. So if they summon like a Dia Bellstar with it, they can't set with that Dia Bellstar. So does it really matter for your opponent? Most of the time it doesn't. There's a lot of interesting applications for this card. Dark Magician decks in the OCG have been using this card, and one of the things that they can do with this, for example, is summon a Witch of the Black Forest which if it goes to the graveyard, it loses the restriction of can't activate its effects this turn. And then you get to search any hand trap in the game. That's how people in the OCG have been searching cards like Maxi or Droll and Lockbird, even though those cards are limited. And I guess if you have them already, you can just search for an Ash Blossom or something like that. So yeah, like summon Witch of the Black Forest, make a Link 1 with it, and then search anything you want to back up your board. Or use it for all kinds of other combos. Summon any high-level spellcaster, and then make Dark Magician of Destruction. Basically, does anything you would want the card to do, and is very splashable as well for decks that are not just the Dark Magician deck. So really, these three cards, each of them is good in Dark Magician as well, but they are just also really good and maybe even better in just Dark Magician of Destruction combo decks, and in the Karibo's case in Rolad, right? So this is the best of the three, I think. Yeah. And then we've got the heroes, and the heroes are an interesting topic because two of them are not actually hero support. I mean, they work in heroes, but both of the new favorite heroes are actually mainly good because they are super poly targets, and both of them give you very unique combination possibilities. So Shining Flare Wingman is a fusion monster and any face-up monster on the field, making super poly super flexible into any fusion strategy, or in any fusion strategy as well. It lets you super poly anything your opponent has if you have a fusion monster. And favorite hero playing Wingman is like the reverse Mud Dragon because it's two monsters with the same type but different attributes. This is a thing that you couldn't do before, and so these make super poly better if your extra deck has space for it. In the case of Shining Flare Wingman, you even get a Pot of Avarice on summon, so if you ever use it in the middle of a game, it becomes even stronger. Like if you go first and you set super poly after your combo, you can super poly into this and then draw 2 cards by shuffling 5 monsters back. So this is out in Master Duel already, and I've pulled that off with the shuffle 5 back and draw 2. It feels incredibly strong. If you super poly 2 monsters and then draw 2 cards, that feels incredible. So both of these actually really good super poly targets, and definitely will see play. As long as super poly sees play, these will be an option. So very impactful, not super helpful for hero itself. I would argue that's a good thing because hero, of course, has a lot of floodgates it ends on. So I was really hoping that the hero support wasn't really that good in hero itself. And for these two, it's definitely true. The Winged Karibo is better in hero itself, mostly because it locks you into heroes. Because you reveal it in hand, pay half your life points, add any poly or fusion spell from deck to hand, which includes super poly, by the way. So pair that with these two new super poly targets, that gives heroes a way to just search super poly going second. So this card is good in hero itself, but not very good in other decks, I would say. It also says during your opponent's turn, if your life points are 1000 or less, quick effect special summon this card, then you can inflict damage to your opponent equal to the highest attack among the monsters they control. Has led to some FTKs. I've seen some people give your opponent a big monster and then put your life points below 1000 and then pass and then immediately burn them for game. I think that's more of a gimmick. I think this card is mainly here to search a fusion spell in hero decks, which is an okay use, but nothing too crazy. I think overall, with considering the strength of heroes overall, I think for now I'll put it in. It probably won't see a lot of play, but if hero ever pops off, I think this card is a legitimate option. Okay, 5Ds. Stardust Dragon Victim Sanctuary is a level 8 generic synchro. When your opponent activates a card or effect in response to your card or effect activation, quick effect, tribute this card, negate the activation, destroy that card. If a monster in your possession was tributed this turn, banish this card from your grave, special the Stardust Synchro monster from your extra deck. You can only use each effect once per turn and not more than one in the same chain. This card is essentially a quote-unquote budget Zaylin, I would say, because it kind of works in a similar way. It can never negate Chainlink 1, but if your opponent ever chains to you, you can just negate. That is very strong. At the same time, it is less powerful than Zaylin in the sense that, you know, Zaylin is just more flexible. Like, Zaylin can negate Chainlink 1 if we're already at Chainlink 3 or something. Like, Zaylin just has more cards it can negate. It doesn't need your opponent to respond to your card. They can also just do 2 Chainlinks on their own, and then Zaylin can negate. Zaylin is stronger than this card in terms of its negation capability, but this card is more generic because Zaylin does need a synchro monster to make it. Also, this card will tribute itself, so it's a one-time thing and then it's gone, but it replaces itself because, of course, you tribute itself and that fulfills the condition for the secondary effect. I think this card is good. I think it's not like the best level 8 synchro in the game right now, so as long as people have access to something like Cypher Lord Omega or something like that, or even the Sword Soul synchros, I think this card is not going to see a whole lot of play, but eventually, I think this card is pretty solid. I think this is a card that could definitely see play at some point. It is nothing to scoff at. Also, one of those cards that I would recommend picking up one copy just to have. It's a generically useful level 8 synchro. There's going to be a time for this card, I think. Yeah, and then we have this pair, which has a lot of people talking about it. We should probably start with Synchro Emergency. If only your opponent controls a monster, you can activate this card from your hand, special summon a monster from your hand, but negate its effect. And then if your opponent controls a monster, special summon from the extra deck, you can special a Synchron from your deck. Until the end of their next turn after this card resolves, you cannot special from the extra deck except Synchro monsters. You can banish this card from your grave and then perform a Synchro summon. So this is a turn 0 hand trap that lets you summon a monster from your hand and a Synchron from your deck, which then sets you up for a Synchro summon. This is something that, of course, because it locks you into Synchros, it needs to be played in Synchro decks specifically, but alongside something like Fedralus Harmonia, this is another exclusive hand trap for Synchro decks, which means that decks like Elf Notes, if they want to play this card, have just more access to newer, higher quality hand traps than other decks in the game, which is very, very powerful. And one of the things that Elf Notes, for example, is doing in the OCG right now, not everyone is playing this card in Elf Notes, but some people do. And if they play it, usually what you're trying to do with it is you can, for example, summon a level 6 Elf Note from your hand and then summon Jet Synchron from the deck, which then makes a Black Rose Dragon, which on turn 0, if that resolves, that can be very powerful. And then, of course, it also leaves you with the Jet Synchron in the graveyard as a resource for a future turn. It is an investment of 2 cards because you lose the monster from your hand as well. And you do need to wait until your opponent has a monster from the extra deck before you can pull it off. So there's ways to interact with it at that point, potentially. Still, really, really strong card in its own. And I think it kind of like just a really strong addition to Synchro decks. So I rate it pretty highly. It doesn't change the entire game because only Synchro decks benefit from it. But those benefit from it a lot because the more unique hand traps that also can't be like called by you can play, I think is pretty strong. It is another hand trap that can just get ashed though. So I mean that's that. But it's one of the cards that has seen the most play in the OCG. And very, very often it is being played alongside Star Junk Synchron, which is a substitute for any Synchron tuner. And you can use each effect once per turn. If it's in the hand, target a level 2 or lower monster in the grave, special summon this card. If you do special summon that monster, you're locked into Synchros, banish it from the grave, cannot be destroyed by card effects. So it's essentially just Junk Synchron, but it doesn't need the normal summon, pretty much. Which, in terms of just a target for Synchro Emergency, that's pretty solid. Like, it's either this or Jet Synchron or both. Because sometimes, of course, you know, you don't always have a level 6 in your hand to summon with Synchro Emergency. Sometimes it's just a level 4. And so when you have a level 4 in your deck, you want to summon Star Junk Synchron to still be able to make that Black Rose, which is one of the more powerful things you can do on turn 0. So yeah, this card is not nearly as good as the trap card, but it's a solid card. It'll see play. But it's not because of this card being so strong. It's more so because it's a target that people like for Synchro. All right, and we are in Zexal. Number 39, Utopia, Emissary of Light. 2 level 4 monsters, can't be destroyed by battle except with numbers. Quick effect, detach a material, target a monster you control. The first time it be destroyed by battle or card effect, it's not destroyed. When the second attack of each turn is declared, make this card gain 25 and gain this effect. When this card destroys a monster by battle and sends it to the grave, special summon it to your field. I don't know, this card's underwhelming to me personally. I've heard people say this card is solid when you play into a board. I mean, it does. In a perfect world, it goes to 5,000 and then it becomes kind of like a Goyo Guardian. I don't know how much I love that, especially considering all of the things that the Utopia deck can already do when you are going, like something like Utopia Double, of course, requires a break, but that thing usually, if it goes off, it just goes for game. So I don't really love this card. I think it looks crazy as an overframe. All of the Zexal cards actually work really well with the overframe like style. But in terms of playability, I think this is one of the weakest ones we've looked at so far. It's not completely unplayable like the ones down here. That wouldn't be fair. But I'll put it in probably not. Then we've got the Gagaga Magician Gagaga Magic, which looks awesome as well because it like punches through the frame of the card. If this card's in your hand, you can special both this card and one Zubaba Gagaga Go 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 Dododo monster from your hand or grave except itself. Then immediately summon a Zubababa Gagaga Go 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 Dododo Jin Heroic Champion numbers EW. I don't know who made this card, man. When you do, treat the level of one of the monsters the same as the other. It's essentially a fancy way of saying it's an extender. that summons a monster and then makes an XYZ. Most of the time, this is going to be a level 4 that summons a level 4 and makes a rank 4, which is like not bad, but at the same time, I feel like the Gagaga decks have like a billion of this card already, so I don't know, like, it's not bad. It's probably good in Automat, but did they really need this? I feel like they had like 3 cards that did this already, so I don't think it changes that much, and that is that. And then we've got Gagaga Girl Cell Phone Subtraction, which is actually one of my favorite cards in this set because it's basically Hop Ear Squadron, but for XYZs. So what this card says is, if your opponent special summons a monster from the extra deck, target a face-up monster you control, special summon this card from your hand, then immediately XYZ summon. When you do, treat this card's level as the same as the targeted monsters. So essentially, what this means is it'll make it possible to go into any rank XYZ depending on what monster you have on the field. So it can be like an interruption on the opponent's turn similar to Hop Ear Squadron, and it'll always have the same level as the monster you have. You know, if you have a level 4, this will become a level 4. If you have a level 6, this will become a level 6. This is really fun. Is this good? Not really. It's not. It's basically the same level of quality as Hop Ear Squadron. In some decks, you could consider it, but it's not crazy. It's just like this is already a little bit of copium that this might see play. It probably won't, but I just think this card is very, very fun. It's the perfect kind of card for the all hand trap deck I've been playing in Master Duel. So once it comes out there, I'll definitely put it in that one to, like, I don't know, summon like Fire Attacker with Rescue Ace Impulse on turn 0 and then go into a rank 6 with it and then see what's possible with that. But then if I have, I don't know, Phantasme instead, I can go into a rank 7 and so on and so forth. The card's really fun, but it's not that strong, I don't think. Maybe in Genesis it has a little bit more of a shot to be relevant. And then we get into the pendulums. This is not my territory of expertise. However, I will say all 3 of these read pretty strong to me. So essentially, the Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon for Heavenly Dragons. During the main phase, destroy this card, add any pendulum with 1500 or less attack from your deck to your hand, and then you can't activate monster effects until you pendulum summon, but still, that's a rota for any pendulum 1500 or less that also puts a pendulum into your extra deck. That seems pretty damn strong to me. And then it also, on the field, it just gets big and does double battle damage, which is kind of reminiscent to the OG Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon. So this is a strong card in my opinion. And then we've got the retrains of the sorcerers here. We've got the Horoscope Sorcerer, which is, if this is in your hand, discard another Magician, Pendulum, Performer Pal, or Odd Eyes, special summon it. If it is special summoned, add a Pendulum monster with 2500 attack from your deck to your hand. That also just seems solid to me. Target a Pendulum monster card you control, destroy it, then add a face-up Pendulum from your extra deck to the hand. So this is kind of like half of a little bit like an Electromite. Pop and add one back. This card seems solid to me as well. And then we got the new Astrograph, which says during the main phase, destroy this card, place a scale 1 pendulum from your hand or deck in your pendulum zone, but neither player can activate its pendulum effects this turn. So you essentially also just duplicate the pendulum scale, like put itself into the extra deck to get another scale 1. And then if a face-up monster card you control is destroyed by battle or card effect, special summon this from the hand, and then you can special one of those destroyed monsters from face-up extra deck or grave. Also kind of reminiscent of OG Astrograph. During the main phase, quick effect, tribute this card, then you can fusion summon a Dragon Fusion from your extra deck by shuffling its materials from field and or extra deck into the deck. You can only use each effect of Astrograph Sorcerer once per turn. So all 3 of these are solid. I think specifically the Odd Eyes is a really strong consistency tool, and I'm not the biggest Pendulum expert, nor am I the biggest Pendulum fan, but I think all 3 of these releasing at the same time, maybe even with the Kirin, I think there's a window for, like, or an opportunity for Pendulum fans to experiment with these, and maybe someone finds something that could end up being viable. The big question is, how good is it going to be going second? Which is always an issue with Pendulum decks these days. And then going first is like, okay, how good is it into stuff like the Charmies? Which often the answer is not that good. But I'll put all of these together in the maybe category, just because I read these and I feel like they are good cards. They're probably better cards than like some of the generic cards in here even. It's just a matter of, will they make Pendulum good enough? And the answer to that, I don't know. Realistically, I don't know. But they're good cards, for sure. All right, and then we've reached Vrains, the Link Monsters. Decode Talker integration is the least exciting one from these, I think. Because it's just a relatively mediocre Link 3. It's a Decode Talker retrain, which makes sense, of course, but tribute a monster this card points to, send a Cyberse monster from your extra deck to the graveyard, which is a quick effect, which means there are some implications here. You can send stuff like Cyber's D-Safe Worm, which requires you to have a Link 5 to negate something. You can send Meteorologic Aggregator, which is a Cyber's monster on your opponent's turn to negate a card, but that can be weird with the timing on it because you need to send it and then you get to negate on a new chain after. Has some potential for a Link 3, but I think just Cyber's has better stuff to go into. Does give you 2 attacks during the battle phase as well. But yeah, it's all right. It's nothing too crazy though. It probably won't see that much play, I don't think. Then we've got Cyber's Code Magician, which mentions Cyanide Ritual, so you get a little bit of a better ritual monster for Cyanide Ritual, which could matter. If a Link monster you control would be used as Link material for a Cyber's monster, this card in your hand can also be used as material. This is interesting. If this card is sent from the hand or field to the grave, send a Cyber's monster from your deck to the grave, or if this ritual summon card, you can special summon that monster instead. In either case, you cannot special for the rest of the turn, except Cyber's. Oh no, what are they gonna do? Okay, so essentially, you might even play this card in some Cyber's decks without even attempting to ritual summon it, because you just use it as a Link climbing tool from hand, Link with it, and then send a monster from deck to the grave. This is genuinely not bad. But there is also other support regarding Cyanide Ritual that some of these cards actually are pretty strong, and we're going to look at another one in a second, that maybe sometimes you can even ritual summon it, and then you get the effect to special one from deck. So this card, I think, is pretty good for this in Cyber's decks. At the same time, Cyber's decks, you know, at the moment, with Malice being like the last one standing at the moment, thank God, only barely standing. I'm not the biggest fan of these decks, but they are scary, and I think this card is scary as well. I don't think it's incredibly crazy though, because at the moment, like, all of these Cyber's combo decks are kind of weak to Charmies at least, but it is a strong card similar to the Pendulum ones. I would put it around here. And then we reach Cyber's Contract Witch, as we also get a little look at the wonderful Sky Striker overframes down here. Cyber's Contract Witch is 2 monsters with the same type. If this card is Link summoned or a monster is special summoned to a zone this card points to, send a spell from your hand or face-up field to the graveyard. Add any ritual monster from your deck to your hand. Target a ritual, fusion, synchro, or exceed this card points to. Special summon a monster from your grave with the same type but a different card type, ritual, fusion, synchro, or XYZ. You can only use each effect once per turn. This card is probably the best card in this set in terms of competitive viability, I think, because it goes into essentially an archetype that is already arguably the best deck in the TCG right now, if not one of the top 3, between like Cool Tune, Elf Note, and Mitsurugi, Azamina, Rolad, Adventure, Fiendsmith, whatever pile people are playing right now. This card is tailor-made for Mitsurugi piles, of course. I mean, a billion years of Habakiri, but any 2 monsters with the same type on Link summon, send a spell away, like a friggin' like Fateful Adventure you've used previously a turn, or a field spell, or any spell in your hand that you don't need, and you just get to search Habakiri. This makes bridging into Mitsurugi so much easier again. I mean, decks were already doing it, so in that sense, it's nothing too crazy, but I mean, this card just makes it so obviously easy, right? Like, at least after Herald of the Arclight and King of the Feral Limbs were banned, it was a little bit harder to bridge into Mitsurugi sometimes. But this card just says any deck that can spam a couple of bodies is going to have access to Habakiri. So yeah, essentially brings back every single Mitsurugi hybrid that you can think of and more, and is going to probably make the lines in that Rolad pile even more like crazy. Even though Rolad in particular can already search Habakiri relatively easily because of the Skull Archfiend, but yeah, I mean, this card is just perfect for any sort of pile with Mitsurugi. Also is a good card in general, just like, you know, for the sake of Cyber's Link climbing with the new ritual cards. Like, you could, you know, just Link 2, add the ritual from deck to hand, then use the ritual in hand to make a Link 3, then this one Foolish is a Cyber's. These cards are also meant to work together really well. So yeah, I mean, 2 really strong cards for Cyber's here, and one that is also very, very strong generic. So yeah, that is how I feel about the cards in this set. I think a lot of it is impactful in the sense that, like, it's just a lot of really generically good stuff. Like, they really... And on a lot of these, I actually quite like the design. I mean, you can let me know how you feel about the overall quality of cards in this set. When they first announced the overframes, I was a little bit afraid that they would make them, like, turbo broken, in order to sell them. I think they kind of, on most of them, I think they hit a pretty good balance between making them good and worth playing, but don't make them completely broken. Like even the cards that are good in this set, you could argue the reason why they're good is not really, like, they're not the problem in that equation. I think like the fact that like the Cyber's Contract Witch searches Habakiri, I think the overall, I mean, people do sometimes hate the bridges, but most of the time I think like Mitsurugi being this splashable in itself is more of the issue. So maybe Habakiri has to go eventually because this card is also being printed now. But a lot of this stuff is just generically solid stuff. Like a lot of these cards, especially the extra deck ones, are just going to be very, very cool one-offs to just pick up and have, because there's a very high chance that most of these will see play at some point. But yeah, I hope that helped you get ready for the Magnificent Monsters release. Don't forget, World Championship is happening this weekend. If you want to tune in, then make sure to check out the Twitch channel. I'm going to be live for all the days. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you liked it. And I'll see you guys next time, Duelists. Bye-bye.